Hey Jay, it's Joerg. Happy Halloween. Well, wanted to know how about your voice and stuff, and if you finally can get the Bombshell issue out. And
Okay then, let's get on with it. This is Bombshell. Bombshell was released in January of 2016 by 3D Realms, and it was greeted to mostly negative reviews, with GameSpot calling it a buggy, bland game, and Hardcore Gamer calling it a dud. Scene World's Joerg thinks that the reason for most of these negative reviews stems from the fact that early beta versions of the game were somewhat buggy, and cited the discrepancies between these negative reviews and overwhelmingly positive reviews given by places like IGN Romania, who gave the game a 9.2. I think, however, that it might have something to do with perspective. I'm not talking about perspective in the sense that a game can be a first-person shooter perspective game, but more in the way that we view the world is a perspective. When you expect something out of life, Duke Nukem, when your worldview has prepared you to see a certain thing, Duke Nukem, and what you actually get is something completely different, Duke Nukem, that can sometimes set poorly with people. Duke Nukem. We're going to need to address this before we go on. In 1996, 3D Realms released Duke Nukem 3D. It was a first-person shooter, and it became very popular because of its random references and inside jokes, and just generally all-around fun gameplay. And that's all that I want to say about that, because this is not Duke Nukem. By the time that Bombshell was released, however, it was pretty well known that this game had once been Duke Nukem. See, 3D Realms and Interceptor had been trying for a while to make another Duke Nukem game, but due to legal disputes, couldn't get the rights to use the intellectual property. Instead, they redeveloped the game, making the once secondary character of Shelly Harrison the main protagonist of the story, and so Bombshell was born. I think that a lot of people came into this game expecting it to be Duke Nukem, and when they didn't get that, they were disappointed. And it's okay to be disappointed, but when reviewing this game, you really need to look at it from the perspective of it being its own game and not comparing it right off the bat with something else. So, gameplay-wise, how does Bombshell stack up? Bombshell feels a little bit like a first-person shooter that's stuck in the third person. It's a top-down, isometric shooter RPG that's light on the RPG. And maybe it's just me. I'm aware that a lot of current RPGs are done similarly to this. But to me, an RPG is always a game where you play as a character that you've built yourself. Either way, you're thrown into the gameplay here without much background on what's going on, who you are, or why you're doing anything. Aliens have landed on the White House lawn, and it's your job, with your robotic arm and infinite ammo, to save the world. Bits of the story are given to you as you proceed through the game. You learn little bits about where you're from and who this character is through both exposition and cutscenes. I found aiming to be a little bit of a pain, though I was using a gamepad, and I suppose mouse and keyboard controls might be a little bit easier to get a grip on. One place this game really shines is in the audio. The music that's been composed, and we talked about music composition when we talked to 3D Realms in the podcast, has been really well done. There are special weapons and abilities that you can pick up throughout the game and activate, but the default gun that you come with, the Iron Maiden, doesn't seem to run out of ammo, and seems to do pretty well, at least as far as I got in the game. You pick up quests as you go along, but I never had much luck keeping track of those and just kept shooting my way through everything. Bombshell is a fun game for running around and blowing things up, and I think this is how the game should be judged rather than by comparing it to what it might have been or complaining about its lack of depth. A game is as deep as you want it to be, and while this one might not have the best writing or voice acting to ever grace your screen, it's far from the fatally flawed disaster that some reviewers have called it. When you design a game, especially one these days, you're building a world that you have to populate with characters that each have their own worlds behind them. As a writer, I can appreciate the challenge in doing that, and I can recognize in the way that this game is presented that it's trying its damnedest to conjure a world that you're going to want to explore more of while keeping a sense of perspective. And there's that word again. So not every game has to be a Kafkaesque labyrinth of story and exposition. Bombshell delivers enough story to keep itself interesting while offering relatively straightforward shoot-'em-up gameplay in a way that lets you shoot things without having to slog through plot points like you're reading a Tolkien anthology. It's also cool to see a game take a risk with a female protagonist, creating a character that isn't overly sexualized or crammed into a traditional gender role. Sure, games like Portal had non-objectified female characters before, but that character lacked identity, with Valve even acknowledging that she was more of a storytelling device than a character. So does Bombshell have some flaws? Sure it does. It's a little light on story and can get monotonous if you play it for a long time, but it's far from unplayable and entirely worth the retail price of $34.99. My official Scene World rating? 2 bombs and a shell? Bombshell is available for sale now on Steam and GOG.com.